Washington Post op-ed calls this proposal, quote, a real howler, a thigh slapper, so laughably stupid, coming from someone who, if he weren't president, likely couldn't get security clearance if he tried. Now, we just heard Speaker Ryan say that the president was trolling the intel officials. Like, what in God's name is going on?
Well, that's exactly what he's doing. He's trolling the intel officials. You're absolutely right. Donald Trump could not ever be cleared into the personnel readiness program for either nuclear weapons or for even a secret level clearance, which is the lowest standard. And practically everybody in the Army gets that now. And let me tell you something. What he's doing is the politics of personal destruction. He is going after these individuals and using the security clearance issue for his base. It has nothing to do with reality. Virtually all of these guys, they don't have a billet anymore. That means a position which requires a clearance, much less giving them access. Only a couple, Jim Clapper and Director Brennan, still have access, maybe John McLaughlin, still have clearances so that they can maintain advisory roles to the overall intelligence community so that when things are discussed and missions that they were involved in are discussed, they can do that in a secure environment. But this is just them going after them personally.
Clint, Mike Flynn had clearance when he shouted, "Lock her up," at the Republican National Convention in 2016. Just this morning, Attorney General Jeff Sessions joined a chant of "Lock her up" just today while speaking in D.C. this morning. Let's listen in.
Go get him. Go get him. Rather than molding, lock her up. Well, so I heard that a long time over the last campaign.
Lock her up. Where does he want Hillary Clinton to serve? Next to Paul Manafort in jail? I'm pretty sure he arrived in court yesterday in a green jumpsuit.
Yeah, it's quite amazing, isn't it, that the Attorney General, who's supposed to be the person ruling law, would even entertain that. I think it's important to remember someone like John McCain, who once would take a stand on the campaign trail and sort of push back on these sorts of things or conspiracies. And to see the Attorney General there laughing, it's a little bit troubling, because the Attorney General should be the person that is the rule of law. They are the person that is nonpartisan. They're the ones that are supposed to be advancing justice around the country. And so it's pretty discouraging to see that. And this just meets a pattern for the Trump administration, which is essentially that everything is seen through a partisan lens. Everything is seen through a Democrat-Republican or Trump versus non-Trump war. And I think it's interesting with these former officials, or in this case with the Attorney General. I think Americans, constituents, they expect more of their institutions, more of their elected leaders, and more of the leaders that are representing these institutions. So it only further erodes the faith and confidence that we have that these institutions are really doing what's right for the country versus doing what's right for their team and their party and their political persuasion.
Malcolm, if you look back at the last 2 weeks and the things that have happened, some of which are of remarkable consequence, whether it's Helsinki or the weird walkbacks or the invitation to Vladimir Putin or the insults to our NATO allies or calling European foes, this doesn't rise to that level. Ken Delanian tweeted yesterday, we should not move on from or stop thinking about how significant it is that after Helsinki and all the walkbacks, Donald Trump tweeted that it was a hoax that Russia interfered in the election, a spit in the eye of his intelligence community. Donald Trump's had a bad 2 weeks. This is really just a distraction. It sort of doesn't have long-term consequences.
Yeah, it's a distraction. And we've, about a year ago when John Brennan and Jim Clapper were making comments related to the Flynn investigation, there was a lot of rumors back then that they were talking about, taking their clearances or even having them arrested. This is just internal talk. It's like that scene in Goodfellas where they're all sitting around the Italian restaurant and they're slapping each other on the back and thinking up horrible things they can do to people. That is the Trump administration when they do these attacks personally. They need to get the heat off of them over what happened in Helsinki. Even though Donald Trump's base thinks it's awesome, the rest of the country thinks it's awful. And by now taking that focus off and saying these people have been divulging, could divulge classified information. Donald Trump divulged classified information directly to our enemies in the Oval
White House,
Office
in the Oval
when he
Office.
compromised the Israeli conference in the Oval Office. So there you have it.
I want to point something out. During the campaign, I interviewed Richard Branson, and he was talking about the first time he met Donald Trump. And he said what struck him, Donald Trump was obsessed with talking about 4 or 5 individuals who he wanted to seek revenge upon, and they were people he went to during one of his 4 or 5 bankruptcies to ask to be bailed out, and they turned him down, and he was laser beam focused on seeking revenge on them. It really feels like we're back in that lane. Clint asked whether the president would revoke President Obama or Joe Biden's clearances. White House Press Secretary Sarah Sanders said they were not on the list at this point. If that happened, what message would that send?
Yeah, it just totally erodes the institutions. And I think a bigger message that you should look at is what does this send inside the intelligence agency and the law enforcement community? When I hear this, what I think is, man, if I was working in the government right now, I'm basically being told unless I play to the president, unless I tell him what he wants to hear, I'm really not going to be heard. And in fact, I might be punished. And that is not what we want. We saw this going back to alternative intelligence processes back during the war in Iraq. We don't want this insulation. We want our intelligence agencies, whether they're current or former, to be able to provide their opinion to inform what's best for the country. So looking at President Obama or Vice President Biden, all of these people maintain some sort of clearance so they can come back and talk about issues that they were involved with personally so that they can provide perspective. They can then hear information, updated inputs about what might be actually going on in the world currently that they're not aware of, so they can help inform the current leadership and help them make better decisions. I think with all of these senior executives, for them, the clearance process ultimately helps the government more than it helps them personally. And I'm pretty upset, to watch this sort of partisan play out because it could have detrimental effects. Think if we want to talk about Iran, which was just brought up this week. Many of these people were involved in Iran issues, negotiations, intelligence going back decades. Wouldn't we want them to tell us what the thought process was, what it was like dealing with Iran? I think that's good for all Americans. And I hope this sort of partisan battle is just theater for the day and not forever.
I just think back just a minute ago in my head, Jeff Sessions laughing as they chanted "Lock her up."
Unbelievable.
Let's remind our audience. Let's remind our audience. The Benghazi investigation took over 4 years. How many indictments were there? 0. Hillary Clinton's email investigation took over 2 years. 0 indictments. The Robert Mueller special investigation at this point has 35 known indictments and plea deals. 35. Lock her up. What does that mean?
Unbelievable. All right, guys, thanks very much. Malcolm Nance and Clint Watts.